where they said that, oh, this version of GPT was trained to be aligned with human like intentions, essentially, and which kind of would in and of itself kind of like get around the reason that they had for not releasing GPT-3, and then they still didn't release the aligned model.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of hypocritical. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I was very upset when they made that decision of like not open sourcing the models, because it's like, oh, you say it's dangerous, so what makes you so what gives you the power to determine what's dangerous to society? And if it is dangerous, then why should you have full control over it? Isn't that the very thing you were trying to avoid by creating this organization in the first place? So yeah, it's a debatable topic. Well, yeah, it's one of those topics it's quite debatable. Like, because there's this balance that a lot of these companies have to strike where, you're creating these potentially powerful technologies and you want to, at least for now, these companies are keeping everything open. Well, most things open source, research, stuff like that. Honestly, I think as time goes on, they'll start to lock shop with a lot of these things when they've figured out how to make something practical like that, make that could generate like billions of dollars. They're not going to open source that for sure. But yeah, it's kind of disappointing that they kind of took that route. So yeah, they basically just ended up doing the same thing that they were trying to work against, which is basically just one company making all the decisions as to what happens to AI in general. It kind of gives the impression that everybody else is stupid, because only they can make a decision as to whether this thing is too dangerous or not. But it is one of those things that's kind of debatable, because like, how do you strike that balance between advancing AI research by like opening it up to the public, at the same time, if whatever your research or whatever you're researching somehow leads to something potentially dangerous and the public can use this, like, what's the moral implications there? I guess we can talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think, research should be just fully open, or like, do you think there should be some sort of safeguards in terms of before you open it up to research, should they basically investigate, how harmful it could be and potentially not even release it? Like, should they do that, or should they just, just open up everything?
Well, I think one of the main, like the core ideas behind research is reproducibility. And like, because in order for like, you can write anything you want in a paper, right. But like, for example, in reinforcement learning, if you set a different seed to the environment, you're going to get a completely different model. So right. You can say anything you want in a paper, but unless you actually release your results, it's almost like they're not verifiable.
Good point. That's actually a good point. Anybody else?
Point. I think that the regulation is always inevitable as it grows. So maybe it's actually better that they do it than government, because government doesn't really understand the technology that well. Seeing at the pace that it moves, and these guys are working directly with it. Maybe they didn't know that they'd have to do it, or maybe they always knew that they'd have to do it eventually. But it serves a purpose, for sure. The wall,
Okay.
but I think that they should provide means for smaller organizations to access it for various projects. Like Google has Google Summer of Code where they get students to do whatever.
Yeah.
They could do something similar except with micro organizations. You enter it and you get access for you don't have to pay the fee. Best projects that they take on, maybe they purchase you or whatever. They could do it like that.
Okay. That's a good point. Anybody else or?
I more or less agree with the regulations for now because everybody's conscious about what the potential of AI. A lot of people see it as dangerous. So, yeah, as I said, phased regulations as it progresses, they release it more and more to the public. But for now, people who are most familiar with the technology should just control it.
Right. All right. I mean, yeah, those are some. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of one dangerous way that AI could be used for. I was thinking maybe it should be open up to the public. I don't know how far it can go and how dangerous it can get though. But I mean, if it open up to the public, you might say new ideas come about that can really help society. I know that it can be dangerous, depends on what they use it for, but it can open up to the public and help in certain area. Like if the AI would be dangerous, like wouldn't like other open sources like, I don't know, Python or other stuff would be dangerous as well. One of those language. Yeah, so I'm just trying to think of what the AI can be used for that would be dangerous. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that just crossed my mind is when you don't open source your research, what's to stop you from cherry picking your results?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I guess that comes back to the question or the original question surrounding this meeting, which is, is a lot of these results released by a lot of these organizations, is it mostly hype or is it substance? Because you said, like, if they're not releasing the actual models, then you can't really verify whether the results that they put in a paper are true. Like, you can't reproduce the results, so you can't really verify what's going on. And I find that a lot of these organizations, they like to, as you said, cherry pick the stuff that work well. So they release press release and everything, and you see all these impressive results. But they have a neat way of kind of tucking away the things that don't work so well. They just hide it in the literature. So unless you're really reading and probing through the paper, you wouldn't realize that the model actually has a lot of deficiencies in several scenarios, but they're not going to show you those. They're going to just show you the ones that work pretty well. But to the point of, whether it could be dangerous, I do find like, I guess it's good press, good clickbait. They make money off of this. Researchers generally want their work to be like talked about. So I think of late, a lot of research has been falling prey to the idea of clickbait. So, these big headlines and releases that aren't really telling the full picture. So when GPT-3 came out, a lot of people are saying like, oh, it could be dangerous to humanity and all sorts of stuff. But I mean, honestly, a lot of it was just bluster. Like, really and truly, I mean, GPT-3 was impressive. I'm not gonna say it wasn't. But I wouldn't say it's human level or we're anything close to some Terminator level scenario where the machines start taking us over. But I feel like a lot of companies like to feed on that fear just to kind of get more clicks. So yeah, maybe it is part of their sort of marketing strategy, kind of make it sound like whatever they have is super dangerous or superhuman level. So like, I guess, that will draw people more to their research. Or maybe, as you said, they kind of want to hide away the fact that maybe it's not as impressive as people think. That's why they're kind of closing away the models themselves. So there's that. I guess it's really around like, I mean, a big issue I think in AI research is kind of deciphering between what's simply just clickbait and what's actually real. Well, yeah. I mean,
I think combination of like all of the above. Like definitely everything that's been said is true. In terms of what's driving them, I guess what's driving them is the AI research, and it's good. As you say, it's good publicity, and with good publicity, you get more companies to invest billions of dollars, like Microsoft has.
Yeah, good point.
And if it's open, maybe they wouldn't do that. I don't know. I don't know what the model is like. Because funding is definitely like key to this working. It's like NASA level is as soon as the money disappears, everything disappears. The scientists disappear, everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, there is some utility, I guess, to not completely opening it up, because as you said, well, if it's completely open, that means anybody can use it. And I mean, no investor or company is going to put money into something that everybody can use. I mean, it's okay if you release like maybe what I'd say a weakened version of it, but like the full thing, if a company is going to be investing billions of dollars, they would want some intellectual property or something that they own that like nobody else has. I think honestly, as time goes on and as a lot of this research kind of moves more into practical tools and more applicable to industry as a whole, I think a lot of these companies will start to move a lot of their stuff more to private, so they won't release as much, and they'll start patenting. Well, even now they're patenting a lot of stuff. So there's that as well. But my general opinion is to err on the side of open sourcing it and releasing it publicly. Because yes, there are potential dangers, but by releasing it publicly, it could lead to additional research that can create things that can essentially guard against those dangers. And the whole verifiability thing is, I think, is a good point that needs to hit home. That definitely there needs to be more of that. But yeah, I generally don't like the idea of this one private company making all the decisions as to something as important. I think it should be a community-based thing. I think the world in general is kind of moving away from the whole idea of these centralized big tech behemoths to more decentralized platforms. As you guys have probably noticed, everybody's talking about Web3 and blockchain technology. I feel like even that AI research is going to move towards a more democratized, decentralized fashion where the community on a whole can decide, what future artificial intelligence should look like. I think that's the safest route to producing a safe form of AI, rather than like one big tech like imagine Facebook controlling the all-powerful AI, As we know, like Facebook isn't really a good example of morality. I mean, we've seen where a lot of these social media companies have their own bias. So, whether they're biased against certain viewpoints. So, I mean, you hear a lot about, disinformation and like content moderation versus free speech. I mean, Elon Musk bought Twitter over this whole thing. That battle between content moderation and free speech. I mean, we've seen examples where these social media companies have removed posts from even major news organizations that actually turned out to be quite true. And yeah, I mean, they just did it and got away with it. So yeah, I generally do not like the idea of a central entity making such a big decision. I think it should be more community-based or decentralized. I mean, what do you think future AI should be developed in a decentralized way? Or are you okay with like a big tech company managing that?
Yeah, honestly, I see the reason why people would patent it. I think that's basically just the essence of building new technology. You want to make sure you have control over it. But I see the concern that you have. I definitely would be curious to what they'll be doing. But even Elon himself said that he was terrified of the potential of AI, and I think that probably sent shockwaves. So, yeah, that's overall the summary of what I think so.
Yeah.
I think it should be in a decentralized way. Because for one, I think AI can help a lot of people. Like, example, right now, I'm doing a capstone and it's basically based on an AI project to detect pulmonary embolism, right? And the location of pulmonary embolism. So they actually did it on this Kaggle site, and they basically say that they encourage like doctors to actually utilize these programs to actually help you to detect pulmonary embolism, like an easier way how to detect it. Rather than left it for last minute. So, because while people waiting and stuff like that, but while people waiting and doing all kind of other tests, they can actually die from this. So that's one way I felt in. And I also looked up like even something to look for cancer cells, cancer in the body, like if you can have a brain tumor and stuff like that. But I did not find so much on it. There is something, but it's very limited from what I see. But I think it should be decentralized. Or if people want to like say make their own AI and say, I don't know, sell it or something like that. But the tools still be decentralized for the creation of AI. That's what I think.
Okay.
I think for me it depends on what stage of development the technology is at. I like decentralized. Well, I love decentralized. I think it's the only way we can survive as a species. I love Web3, and a project developed in Web3 is very, very likely to come about. I would say shortly, just based on the projects that I see people doing in the creative space and the amounts of money that they're raising to do those projects.
Yeah.
I think the AI would be a no-brainer. Anybody would want to own that, considering people are buying digital, art.
Yeah.
Of a ape, like for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
People would definitely throw a lot of money at it. So the money wouldn't even really be a problem there. The only problem is when it starts to plateau. The capitalistic model has like a way of they throw a lot of money at it, get the best talent, and then they get it through that point, they break through that, and then you can democratize it again after that. So I think like regulatory framework around that, like the exchange between decentralized and centralized, because they both serve their purpose, and I think they both will be useful going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely moving towards, or I mean, society seems generally to be moving towards this whole decentralized. I mean, although I do think we're in, I think right now we're like I don't know if you guys, well, I guess you guys have probably read about the whole dot-com bubble back in the 90s, where the web was seen as the thing, which it is, or that panned out to be the case. But I feel like we're kind of in that same place with Web3 and blockchain technology or blockchain companies, where you have a lot of projects that people are pumping a lot of money into, but I think most of them will probably fail. That may lead to some sort of crash in the markets, who knows. But not to say it means that Web3 or decentralized technology won't succeed. I think it will succeed. It's just that most of the companies or the projects right now that are in the space probably won't survive that crash. But I think like AI or how I envision AI of the future, or AGI, is instead of having like one central, like basically intelligence, you could have like a community of intelligence. So basically, you have several AGIs. So like maybe US has their AGI, China has their AGI. But what I'm hoping is that you basically, instead of like just having the power in like one entity, it's democratized so that there will never be a case where one entity can overpower the whole. Yeah, as long as the whole has, access to that same form of power, which I honestly probably will never really be the case. I mean, things always somehow generally, even if idealistically you want to make it more flat and democratized, I think generally things somehow tend towards some sort of hierarchical fashion. So even the Web3 thing, I think that will eventually somehow move towards some sort of hierarchical fashion where there's a few companies that you'd say are the top ones, or the top, or what people would call monopolies, kind of like with social media now, where you have a few companies at Facebook that kind of owns everything. But yeah.
Yeah, the hierarchies are inevitable, and but as long as it's community driven, it's going to be our fate. I won't call it good or bad, but community drives society in general. So if community is driving the technology, then we can't really complain where it's going to take us. Just have to kind of be prepared for the ride, because a lot of crazy stuff are going to happen.
Yeah.
Just know how to respond when certain things happen, because as I said, you never know where it can go.
Okay.
I think open source has been pretty, the concept of open source in industry itself has been pretty well demonstrated. Because I mean, you have companies like self-driving car companies like Comma AI, for example, who develop something open source that essentially directly competes with Tesla.
Yeah.
In terms of in terms of their self-driving capability. So, and they're a very small company. I think they said that their actual machine learning team is less than 10 people, because compared to like a giant like Tesla.
Right.
So, a lot of the contributions, I'm assuming, would have come from the open source community. So I definitely think that open source is can definitely be pretty helpful.
I honestly think that, at the end of the day, the open source is kind of what really drives the technology forward. Because, I mean, let's kind of look at the smartphone thing with, like, Apple, when they released the iPhone, great thing, right? But then you have Android, which was kind of the more open source thing that Google bought. But the idea is that even with like self-driving cars, I think that same thing will happen. So I mean, right now you could say Tesla is leading the forefront on, like, at least practically implementing self-driving cars. I won't say necessarily in terms of the technology, but practically implementing, like, in consumer hands, Tesla, right? But I think you're going to have open source alternatives. I mean, as Common AI is kind of one example. So you'll probably end up having like an Android of self-driving cars. So basically, just like how you have an Android software that like other like phone manufacturers can basically put on their device, and they're going to make their own customizations to it. But they're, at the end of the day, they're running core Android. The same thing I think will happen with like self-driving car in the future. Like, kind of, once they've nailed down sort of the technology, you're gonna have some open source alternative that basically kind of like how Android, where everybody, if you're not an iPhone, you're just gonna put the smartest thing is just put an Android OS on your phone. I think the same thing is gonna happen with self-driving cars. You're gonna put like some sort of OS like everybody uses for self-driving cars, which will kind of make the technology more ubiquitous and easier. So I guess communicate with each other and stuff like that. I think that's where that's going to lead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the low level to mid level will be open source.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but to touch on something Jordan said, like the open source does drive it, and it's useful. But it's useful to everybody, and so that's good and bad. So you talk about the companies that are doing good things, but I'm sure there's a lot of drug empires using open source code to keep their their companies afloat.
True.
So I say low level, mid level code being open source, but a high level, I think that will always it will always be concentrated. Just inherently based on the level of funding and manpower and research are necessary to make those strides.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally why I was all for the regulations for the same point. I've actually been dabbling in Web3 from like last year, and I've been seeing endless scams all the time. People just, yeah, they'll be just using the hype of what's going on. So I'm thinking something about AI, because AI is very interrelated with cybersecurity. And I think everybody's conscious to what, a smart, evil brain could do with the right technology. Using the cutting edge that they currently are building, or what they could do to, let's say, higher level corporations that are not even on the same level of AI yet, or are developing it themselves, which is why they're investing, cutting it, and protecting for the time being until they can at least fully observe it and all the pros and the cons, and even equip themselves against it. The same thing when I see when they have research facilities and they're doing all these biochemistry stuff. They don't want anybody to find out about it yet because they don't want the wrong people to find out about it. So that's just my view on it. There's goes on back to regulation, but I think it's necessary, especially if something is new and developing. They see potential for harm, and there's cybersecurity work going on all the time, especially China, North Korea, and Russia. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, with any technology, you're going to have your bad actors and your good actors. You're going to have the people that use it for bad, people that use it for good. I guess it comes down to, can the good outweigh the bad? Yeah. Do I think that should be a reason to close it off? Not necessarily. I mean, something very harmless can be used as a weapon. Or does that mean we're going to stop using that? No, I don't think so. I think it really comes down to humans and how they use it. The technology, at least for now. Going forward, who's to say these technologies that we're developing won't have some form of autonomy in terms of their decisions. That's a whole other ball game to think about. But yeah. Yeah. But I guess we can more or less wrap the discussion here. I don't know if you guys had any last thoughts before we call it. All right. Before we go, there's, as I had mentioned in the group, I'm planning a JAIA conference. Well, I don't even like to call it a conference. Let's say a meetup. So basically, probably have like presentations. Probably have like a discussion / debate thing on some topic. I'm thinking of getting sort of like a guest speaker or something like that. Maybe somebody internationally, who knows? Maybe we can get them over Zoom or something. If you guys have any ideas of, somebody in AI you'd want to guest speak at or meetup, please let me know. Or in the group, maybe. Or maybe you have some suggestions now. But yeah, if you can't think of any, you can, I guess, send it in the WhatsApp group. Yeah, but it should be around maybe sometime in June. Like on a weekend, for like an hour or two. But yeah, I think it would be good if like the community as a whole, people interested in AI or practicing AI in Jamaica to kind of meet each other, kind of sort of build that bond where like, somebody has a problem they're working on, they can help each other out. The whole aim really is to kind of further the AI education and AI development and research in Jamaica and the region. So I mean that's the overall goal of this community in general, or this organization. But yeah. Yeah, I think we can probably call it here. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. It was a good discussion. I guess we can meet up again next week, talk about another topic. All right, guys.
Yeah, have a good night, guys.
Nice.
All right, bye.
All right, later, guys.
Take care.